My wife and I were married for 16 years. At the time of this story, we had 2 children ages 8 and 11. Our eldest would occasionally watch videos on mom's smartphone, with our youngest watching beside him. I guess we were a pretty average family. I worked full-time while my wife worked part-time and oversaw the house and child rearing. I would help, of course, but our children saw their mother more than me. Over time, our relationship became emotionally distant. It was tiring enough keeping up our daily charade. Despite this, I thought my wife was happy. I went to bed thankful each night for my family, shelter, and security. My wife and I were proud of the savings we built for our children's future. I joked with her often, saying we were living the American dream. A dream without emotional connection or spontaneity. It was January, so it was cold, and we were digesting the huge financial bite we took to give our kids a great Christmas. I was already planning our summer getaway. The kids were going to a summer camp while the missus and I were going to Las Vegas. I told myself I didn't care what happened in Vegas, as long as my wife and I connected emotionally and physically. From January to May, I tried talking to my wife. We went on bike rides as a family, and it really was therapeutic. It became something we did every day. But when it came to talking, my wife didn't have much to say to me. She did, however, have a lot to say to a complete stranger. While she cooked dinner, I sat on the couch with our kids as they watched a video on her phone. I saw a notification pop up from Abel. It was on an app one never heard of, and the message said something like, "You never know what the future holds." My son swiped the notification away, but I took the phone from him, telling him to play hide and seek with his sister. While my wife cooked and my kids entertained themselves, I frantically looked through the phone. I found several notifications leading to the messages between my wife and Abel. They were part of some kind of support group, but I wasn't sure what for. Their messages never turned sexual, but it was certainly heartwarming. My wife said she wished he lived closer to her so they could meet up. In earlier messages, she explained she was struggling to maintain motivation for her marriage, and went on to about me. The only things to really complain about were how much I worked and that I always said the same things. She didn't feel like she had anything new to say either, which made her feel like our relationship had nothing to offer us anymore. In response to that, AP scooped in. He said he could always be in her life, to bring her solace and hope for the future. He said now that they met, he wanted to be whatever she needed him to be in her life. He never had children, but said he always wanted to be a supportive father figure. I was extremely uncomfortable. This man was close to my wife, and far too willing to step in if she called on him. I took screenshots of everything and returned her phone, saying it was in between the couch cushions. I could tell she was nervous that I even had her phone. I didn't want my wife to be talking with this guy, but I also didn't know what to say. It felt like anything I took the time to say would be wasted breath because I was still me. I didn't think I could make her see me for who I was, her lover, best friend, and father to her children. It was up to her to see me for who I was, but she'd forgotten what made her fall in love with me in the first place. I returned home from work the next day to find my wife super nervous and jittery. She got defensive with me after the first question I asked her. Annoyed, I decided to go for a run alone. I only managed to walk to the end of our street before I heard something and turned around. It was a man leaving my house in a hurry, holding his shoes and belt. I ran over to him just as he closed the door and started the car. I laid on the hood to stop him from leaving. He rolled down his window a little with his heart, visibly pounding his chest, asking me what I was doing. I asked if he was a bull. He just looked extremely fearful. I asked what he was doing with my wife and he just started begging me not to fight him. I told him I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to know the truth. It was a bull, here to see my wife, but only has a supportive friend. I asked him why, then was he holding his belt and shoes? He hesitated and his chest started heaving again. I told him I'd give him something to fear if he didn't tell me what I wanted to know. With that, he admitted to having sex with her, but only because she wanted him to, and he promised never to see her again. I got off the hood as he said he didn't realize what he was getting himself into. He swore one more time never to speak to her again before speeding off. My wife was standing on the porch speechless. She watched me walk towards her with my head hanging down. I told her I was divorcing her and she needed to pack her stuff. She started freaking out, hyperventilating, asking me about the kids and what would happen next. I didn't have anything to say to her. She called her mother on speakerphone to try to convince me to forgive her and stay married, but I told her mother everything that happened. She sounded so disappointed that she hung up immediately and apparently had no interest in talking to her daughter. Her daughter broke vows and refused to work with me for the betterment of our marriage. She lost her house due to me kicking out, lost her husband, and lost parental support because of her actions. Instead of forming a relationship with another man on her phone, she should have started over with me. She could have just dropped her defenses and normal way of thinking to be honest with me. No matter how much it might have hurt, discussing what drove her apart from me might have made all the difference and saved our family. I did the best I could over those 16 years and honestly never expected her to stoop so low. I always made myself available to her and tried to keep her happy, but it wasn't enough. If she just would have been patient and considerate, I know we could repair our relationship on vacation and over time. OP, don't ever blame yourself for someone else's actions and decisions. She chose to join a group online and secretly start talking to someone else about how she felt. She chose to invite that man over and sleep with him instead of reminding herself of why she fell in love with you and chose you in the first place. Maybe you guys would have started a new hobby together. Maybe you could have kept up the family bike ride in the evenings. There are many ways to inspire a maturing relationship. It won't always feel like how it started out because life is full of change. Relationships and people change. Your wife had a responsibility to keep her head on straight and do whatever she needed to do to improve the life of her kids, husband, and self. Instead, she chose a path of distrust and haste. It was like she covered up a fatal wound with a band-aid. The cause of the problem wasn't dealt with, and now the beautiful marriage must end. You understand that this wasn't your fault, but also that a marriage takes two wise and willing participants. By cheating, your ex was no longer a willing participant in the marriage. Thank you for sharing your story. Now it's time to get into our second story for today. I was about to propose to my girlfriend. We met 3 years prior in the first pottery class of our freshman year at the Institute of Art. Sitting beside each other as we sculpted pots, we had real conversations that became something I looked forward to. As it turned out, both our parents tried to discourage us from going to college as art majors. They didn't see it as a career with stability, but I knew this was because they were from a different time. My father was taught to work hard in physical labor, and my mother was taught to be a faithful housekeeping wife and mother. My girlfriend's parents were extremely similar, so we joked around about getting them together. I really did imagine her parents meeting mine and then us getting married. After our 3rd anniversary, I planned to propose before we graduated. I believe there was a reason we met at art school. Despite both our parents' discouragement, we were meant to be artists together. In our 2nd year of college, my girlfriend and I put together a website to sell our creative pieces. We came up with a creative name that included our initials. This was an inspiring thing to do together to boost our confidence, portfolios, and cooperation skills. I had no idea how short-lived her participation would be. With a proposal on my mind but not quite on my lips, I went to surprise my girlfriend with lunch one day. She had an internship at an art gallery on 3rd Street. As I walked down the wide corridor toward the back room, I noticed 2 people passionately kissing through partially open blinds. Upon closer inspection, I realized it was my girlfriend. She was in the office of Mr. Potts, the art gallery manager. Instantly, my whole world crashed down. I felt like I wasted prime years of my life chasing a pointless career with a heartless lying woman. Shocked and hurt, I threw open the door and yelled for them to stop. They were disheveled and shocked. AP must have been at least 15 years older than me. He looked extremely embarrassed and said, "I'm sorry, son," as soon as he realized this was my girlfriend. I yelled at her, asking what she was doing kissing this man. She was quiet, wiping her mouth when she tried to grab my arm and lead me away. There were several people, including gallery visitors and art critics, gathering outside the office, listening and watching. I refused to go quietly after I started piecing things together. While she tried to pull me down the hall, I announced loudly that she was making out with him because he was the one responsible for promoting artists. She threw my arm down and asked why I was there. I held up the lunch bag and loudly said I was bringing her lunch when I caught her cheating on me. The crowd was shocked and started to give us space. Mr. Potts' blinds were fully shut now, with the door locked. She whispered, saying she didn't cheat. She only slept with him to boost her career, so it didn't count as cheating. I was speechless. I was so surprised she was being serious. She didn't think sleeping with this man in exchange for personal gain was cheating. I asked her what she thought it was, and she said nothing, thereby expecting me to forgive her and maintain our relationship. She said all she had to do was show him her breasts, then he did the rest. I called her crazy and dumped her. My exact words were, "I won't marry someone like you." I immediately went to the receptionist. I demanded to see or speak with the man in charge of Mr. Potts. The head of the gallery, Mr. Espot, came downstairs to meet with me. The same crowd from earlier was standing with me, as if to support and back up my claims, but I think they just enjoyed the unfolding drama. My girlfriend and the art gallery manager were dramatically fired in front of at least 13 people, who cheered when Mr. Espot gave the word. Within 30 awkward minutes, my girlfriend lost her potential husband and internship. She cried in front of everyone and left. That was the last time I saw her, but I heard she failed to graduate the same year I did, probably because she was too embarrassed to submit any art into the gallery and lost her inspiration. Her art and initials are no longer part of my website, which is still thriving to this day. Sometimes I wish I would have gotten the chance to talk to her about how meaningful sexual relations are. Our bodies are meant to be sacred, and who we sleep with is a pretty big indicator of where our life leads. From the sound of it, she didn't take anyone seriously. For someone to use sex to their advantage is extremely disrespectful, especially if they're in a committed relationship with someone else. Where's the humility and honor in that situation? Life is hard for everyone, and sometimes people do desperate things to ensure better opportunities for themselves, but they fail to see that when they take shortcuts, it only hurts them and the people they use or disregard. Mr. Potts lost his job and possibly his family at home because of one intern's unexpected temptation. She didn't love him, but his wife did, and you loved her. She didn't consider any of this and did an excellent job proving herself selfish, inconsiderate, and manipulative. Keep your faith that you won't marry someone like her. There are women out there who've matured and learned what's most important in a committed, meaningful relationship: consideration, compassion, communication, and faithfulness. Everybody has their own thought processes and struggles, but when you love someone, you accept those without judgment. It should be the individual's goal to grow and learn, to diminish their bad habits and practice good ones, therefore improving the marriage altogether. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Hey, so here's how it started. I'd been suspecting something fishy for a while. You know, my wife Jenna always had this look like she was hiding something, like when she'd jump at every text notification, or how she'd suddenly started working late but never talked about her day anymore. Weird, right? So I did what any guy in my shoes would do. I hired a private investigator. Guy was like something out of a noir film, trench coat and all. When he first showed up, I half expected him to light up a cigarette and start talking about some dame in distress. Anyway, this let's call him Jack, he gets to work. He's got gadgets and gizmos. Felt like I was in a spy movie or something. He starts tailing Jenna, taking photos, the whole 9 yards. And me, I'm trying to act normal, keep the home fires burning. I'm making dinner, asking Jenna how her day was, all while wondering what Jack's finding out. So a couple of weeks go by and Jack calls me for a meeting. We sit down in this dingy diner, the kind where the coffee's too strong and the pie is too sweet. He slides this envelope across the table. Inside, there they are. Pictures of Jenna and our neighbor Rick. Rick of all people. The dude borrows my lawnmower every other Sunday. And there he is, cozying up to my wife at some fancy restaurant, laughing at some joke, looking like he doesn't have a care in the world. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. Jenna and we'd had our ups and downs, sure, but I never thought she'd do something like this. And with Rick, it was like a bad joke. Rick, who'd come over for barbecue and beers, who'd talk about his fantasy football team like it was the most important thing in the world. And here he was sneaking around with my wife. I remember driving home that night, the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like some toxic thing. I was angry, sure, but also just tired. Tired of the lies, the secrets, the not knowing. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a while, watching the lights in our house. Jenna was in there, probably watching some reality TV show or scrolling through her phone. And I'm sitting out here with proof that our life together's a sham. So I go inside trying to keep my face blank. Jenna's on the couch and she looks up, smiles, asks how my day was. And I just nod, say it was fine, nothing special. But inside, I'm a mess. I'm thinking about how I'm going to confront her, what I'm going to say. Do I throw the pictures in her face? Do I play it cool, gather more evidence? But for that night, I just went to bed, pretending everything was normal. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about Jenna, about Rick, about this whole messed up situation. And I realized something. I needed a plan. I couldn't just confront Jenna, not yet. I needed to be smart about this, play the long game. So that's what I decided to do. I'd play the doting husband, keep my eyes and ears open, and figure out what my next move would be. Little did Jenna know I was onto her. And Rick, Mr. Friendly Neighbor? He was going to get his too. It was just a matter of time. One evening, Jenna sits me down all serious like. She's got this rehearsed speech about open marriage and exploring ourselves. I'm just sitting there poker-faced trying to keep my cool. Inside, my mind's racing a mile a minute, thinking about those pies photos of her and Rick. But there I am, nodding like one of those bobblehead dolls, pretending to consider it. Jenna's going on about how we've grown apart, how we need to find ourselves again. You know, all that self-help mumbo-jumbo. She's talking about freedom and new experiences, but all I can hear is I want to cheat without feeling guilty. The irony, right? There she was, pitching this idea to me, not knowing I already had the scorecard. I throw in a question here and there, playing the part of the intrigued husband. How does this work? Aren't you worried about our relationship? That sort of thing. And Jenna, bless her, she's got answers for everything, like she'd been planning this talk for weeks. Maybe she had. She talked about trust and honesty that almost made me laugh and how it could strengthen our relationship. The whole time I'm thinking about Rick, Mr. Nice Guy next door, who probably thought he was so clever. And Jenna, who was trying to paint this picture of a modern, open-minded relationship, when in reality she just wanted her cake and eat it too. So I tell her I need time to think about it. It's a big decision, I say, and she nods, looking relieved that I didn't shut it down right away. She's probably thinking she's played her cards right, got me considering this wild idea. Little did she know I was 2 steps ahead. That night I lay in bed, Jenna's fast asleep next to me, probably dreaming about her freedom. And I'm wide awake thinking about my next move. This proposition of hers, it was a curveball, but I could work with it. It gave me an angle, a way to turn the tables. I start imagining different scenarios, how to use this to my advantage. Maybe I could agree to it, see how she reacts. Would she jump at the opportunity, run straight to Rick? Or would she backpedal, realizing I called her bluff? But it wasn't just about catching her in the act anymore. It was about understanding why. Why Jenna? Why Rick? Why this whole mess? I wanted answers, and I wasn't going to rest until I got them. So I drift off to sleep, a plan forming in my mind. Jenna wanted an open marriage? Well, she was going to get more than she bargained for. I was going to play the game, but on my terms. And at the end of it, I'd be the one holding all the cards. Before we dive into the next chapter of this roller coaster story, I've got a small favor to ask. If you're enjoying this tale of love, adventure, and unexpected twists, how about showing some love? Hit that like button to let me know you're on board. It's a simple click for you, but it means the world to me. It's like a virtual high five telling me to keep the stories coming. And hey, why stop there? Go ahead and hit subscribe too. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming up next. Okay, so here's the twist. I'm not just gonna sit around feeling sorry for myself. No way. It's time for some good old-fashioned cunning. I start planning, scheming almost. I'm gonna outsmart Jenna at her own game. How, you ask? By becoming the most supportive husband on the planet. Yeah, you heard that right. I'm encouraging her idea, nodding along to her talks about freedom and self-discovery. All the while I'm collecting evidence, making notes. In my head it's like 2 can play this game. So I start this double life. By day I'm Mr. Supportive, telling Jenna to explore, to find her happiness. By night I'm like a detective in those old films, piecing together the puzzle. I'm checking bank statements for unusual expenses, noting down times she comes home late, even keeping track of her wardrobe choices. You'd be surprised what you can learn from a change in fashion sense. Meanwhile, I keep in touch with the pie Jack. He's getting more into the nitty-gritty now. We're not just talking about tailing Jenna anymore. We're digging into Rick's life too. Turns out, our friendly neighbor isn't as clean-cut as he seems. Jack's finding connections to some shady characters, the kind you don't want to owe money to. In the midst of all this, I'm doing some soul searching. What do I want out of all this? Revenge? Closure? I don't even know anymore. But one thing's for sure, I'm not going down without a fight. Jenna thinks she's playing me, but she has no idea what's coming. Every conversation with Jenna, every encounter with Rick, it's all part of the plan now. I'm watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. And it's not just about catching Jenna in the act anymore. I want to understand the whole picture, see how deep this rabbit hole goes. The strategy's simple. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Jenna's my wife, but right now she's on the other side of the chessboard. And Rick, he's just a pawn in a much larger game. I start making subtle changes too. Working out more, dressing better, even picking up new hobbies. It's all part of the facade, this new version of me that's playing the game. Jenna notices, says I seem different, more alive. If only she knew why. As the days pass, the tension at home is like a ticking time bomb. We're both playing our parts, smiling and pretending. But the air's thick with unspoken truths. It's a psychological game, a battle of wits, and I'm determined to come out on top. So that's the strategy: be the supportive husband, gather the evidence, and wait for the perfect moment to turn the tables. Jenna thinks she's in control, but she's just a player in my game now. And I'm playing to win. Now, while Jenna's off with Rick, I'm not just sitting around twiddling my thumbs. No, I start my own adventure. Kinda like a side quest in a video game, you know? I meet people, make friends. It's a whole new world out there, and I'm diving in headfirst. Some of them are in similar situations, dealing with their own relationship dramas. Others are just interesting characters with stories that could fill a book. First up, there's Lisa. She's a bartender at this cozy little joint I stumbled upon. Man, she's got a sharp wit that can slice through the thickest tension. She has this way of talking about life, mixing humor and wisdom, that just makes you see things differently. We chat about everything and nothing, from the meaning of life to the best way to make a martini. She doesn't know my story, the whole Jenna and Rick saga, but her perspectives, they're like a breath of fresh air. Then there's Mark, met him at the gym of all places. The guy's built like a tank, but he's got a heart of gold. He's going through a rough patch himself, something about a messy divorce. We spot each other not just with the weights but in life too. He's got this positive energy, always pushing forward no matter what. Makes me think maybe there's a light at the end of this tunnel I'm in. These new connections, they're giving me something I didn't realize I'd lost, a sense of belonging. A feeling that there's more to life than this drama I'm in. It's weird, you know, finding fragments of yourself in strangers. They're showing me different paths, different ways to live, and I'm soaking it all in. I start trying new things, exploring new hobbies. I pick up a guitar, start strumming some tunes. I'm no Hendrix, but hey, it's fun. I even join a local book club, can you believe it? Me discussing literature over coffee and pastries. It's a far cry from the late-night stakeouts and secret meetings. But here's the kicker: as I'm out there, living this parallel life, I'm learning, growing. These experiences, they're not just distractions, they're shaping me, changing the way I see things. I'm not just the guy whose wife's having an affair anymore. I'm more than that. I'm a friend, a musician in the making, a budding literary critic. And as I'm rediscovering myself, the situation at home becomes clearer. It's like stepping back from a painting and finally seeing the whole picture. Jenna's affair, it's just a part of a larger canvas, and I'm starting to figure out where I fit in it. So while Jenna's off with Rick, living her double life, I'm on my own journey, finding new sides of myself, meeting people who light up different parts of my soul. It's an unexpected turn in my story, but hey, isn't that what makes life interesting? Things start getting weird, like really weird. Jenna's acting all jumpy like a cat on a hot tin roof. Every time her phone buzzes, she's on it faster than lightning, and her eyes dart around like she's expecting the FBI to bust down the door. And Rick, oh boy, he's looking over his shoulder like he's the star of a spy movie. I'm telling you, it's like watching a thriller unfold right in my own backyard. This is where it gets juicy. I'm hearing rumors, whispers around the neighborhood. People are talking about debts, shady deals, and not so legal activities. Looks like our Mr. Nice Guy neighbor isn't so nice after all. And my trusty pie, Jack? He's digging up more dirt than a backhoe at a construction site. It's not just affair stuff now, it's big-time trouble. Turns out, Rick's into some seriously bad business, the kind that gets you more than just dirty looks. One day, Jack shows up with this folder, thick as a novel. He's got bank statements, photos, Records, it's like Christmas came early for a snoob like me. We're talking illegal gambling, money laundering, you name it. Rick's mixed up in all sorts of shady stuff. And Jenna, she's right there with him, knee-deep in the mud. I start putting the pieces together and man, it's like a jigsaw puzzle from hell. Jenna's nervous behavior, those late-night whispers on the phone, it all makes sense now. She's not just cheating, she's tangled up in Rick's criminal spider web. Now, I'm not just dealing with a broken marriage. I'm in the middle of a crime drama. And let me tell you, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. I've got to tread carefully, play my cards right. One wrong move and I could end up in a world of trouble. But the plot thickens. I'm seeing changes in Jenna that I can't ignore. She's not the same woman I married, she's secretive, paranoid, and I can tell she's in over her head. Part of me wants to confront her, shake her out of this nightmare she's walked into. But the other part, the cold, calculating part, tells me to wait. Gather more evidence, build a case so airtight it could float in space. And Rick, he's getting more brazen, more careless. I see him around the neighborhood, throwing glances over his shoulder, meeting with shady-looking characters. It's like he's on a self-destruct button countdown, and I'm just waiting for the explosion. So there I am, stuck in the middle of this unraveling mess. My wife's tangled up in a criminal's web, and I'm sitting on a mountain of evidence. It's a dangerous game, but I'm in it to win it. I'm not just going to sit back and watch my life crumble. No, sir, I'm going to take control of the narrative, steer this ship through the storm. But let me tell you, it's not easy. Every day brings a new challenge, a new twist. It's like living in a suspense novel, except the stakes are real, and the ending's still unwritten. One night, it's like a switch flips in me. Enough is enough. I decide it's time to confront Jenna. No more games, no more waiting. It's like stepping into the ring for the final showdown. I wait for her to get home, sitting in the living room, every light off except for the lamp by my chair. It's all very cinematic, trust me. She walks in, sees me sitting there, and I can tell she knows something's up. Her smile fades faster than a shooting star. I don't waste any time. I lay it all out, the affair, Rick's shady dealings, everything I've learned from Jack and my own detective work. I watch her face go white as a ghost. It's like watching someone realize they've been caught in a trap they didn't even know was there. Jenna stammers, tries to explain, but it's all excuses, you know? The kind of stuff you'd expect in a situation like this. It's not what you think, you've got it all wrong, that sort of thing. But I'm calm, collected, like a judge delivering a verdict. I tell her I know everything. Man, the shock in her eyes, it's something else. It's a mix of fear, guilt, and something else I can't quite put my finger on. But here's the twist, I'm not just angry. I'm disappointed, profoundly disappointed. This was the woman I married, the woman I thought I knew. And here she is, a stranger in my own house. I ask her the questions that have been burning in my mind. Why Rick? Why lie? Why drag me through this hell? Her answers are a jumble of half-truths and tearful apologies. She talks about feeling lost, confused, about how things with Rick just happened. It's like listening to a script from a bad soap opera. I sit there, listening to her unravel the web of lies she's been weaving, and it's almost surreal. This confrontation, it's not just about anger or it's about closure, about ripping off the band-aid and facing the wound underneath. I needed to hear her say it, needed to face the reality of our broken marriage head-on. And then I do something that surprises even me. I don't yell, don't throw accusations or insults. I simply tell her that I can't be part of this lie anymore. That the woman I loved, the woman I thought she was, would never have done something like this. It's a quiet moment, but it's powerful. The air is thick with unspoken words and shattered illusions. As the night wears on, we talk more about us, about what went wrong, where we go from here. It's not a pleasant conversation, but it's necessary. We're like two actors at the end of a play, taking off our masks and seeing each other for who we really are. So that's the confrontation. It's not a fiery explosion of drama and tears. It's a quiet implosion, a realization that sometimes things just can't go back to the way they were. And as I go to bed that night, I know that a chapter in my life is closing. A painful, messy chapter, but one that's taught me more about myself than I ever thought possible. So Rick's world starts crumbling like a cookie in a toddler's fist. The cops get involved, and it's not just a small-time thing. We're talking raids, flashing lights, the whole 9 yards. Turns out, Rick's been neck-deep in illegal activities, stuff that makes a soap opera plot look like a bedtime story. And Jenna, oh Jenna, she's terrified. realizing she's been playing house with a bona fide criminal. It's like watching a house of cards in a windstorm. 1 minute Rick's Mr. Respectable neighbor. Next thing you know, he's being handcuffed and shoved into a police car. The neighborhood's buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. Everyone's got theories, but I'm sitting back, watching the show with a bucket of popcorn. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Now Jenna, she's in full panic mode. She comes to me all tears and apologies. It's like a dam's burst, and years of lies and deceit are flooding out. She's blubbering about not knowing the real Rick, how she got caught up in the thrill of it all. But here's the thing, I'm done. Totally, utterly done. I've seen a different life now. One where I'm not the punchline in someone else's joke. I tell Jenna it's over. No dramatic shouting matches, no throwing plates. Just a calm conversation, which almost makes it worse, right? I've had enough drama to last a lifetime. She's begging, promising change, but it's like the ship's already sunk, and she's offering me a bucket to bail water. The next few days are a blur of moving boxes and legal papers. It's weird how quickly a life built together can be dismantled. I'm dividing up possessions with the precision of a surgeon. Every item is a memory, good or bad, but I'm past clinging to the past. As for Rick, the guy's toast. Legal troubles up to his eyeballs. And the neighborhood? Turns into a real-life crime drama set. People can't stop talking about it. I even overhear a couple of kids trading Rick stories like baseball cards. In the middle of this chaos, I'm finding peace. It's like I've walked through a storm and come out the other side. I'm reconnecting with old friends, picking up hobbies I'd forgotten I loved. It's a rediscovery of who I was before Jenna, before Rick, before this whole mess. Jenna moves out, and the house feels different, emptier, sure, but also like a weight's been lifted. I'm turning over a new leaf, rediscovering joys in the little things. Morning coffee tastes better. The sun seems brighter and I'm smiling more. It's not happiness, not yet, but it's a start. I realize that this downfall, it's not just Rick's or Jenna's. It's the end of a chapter in my life too. But every end's a beginning, right? I'm standing at the start of a new path. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see where it leads. So here's the kicker. Jenna's fairy tale turns into a nightmare. Her affair blows up like a firecracker in her face. Rick, he's trading his suburban castle for a jail cell. And me? I'm like a bird that's just been let out of a cage. Free. It's a whole new world and I'm standing at the threshold, ready to take the leap. I'm not just talking about moving on. I'm talking about a total life overhaul. I've got these new friends, see? Lisa and Mark, they're like my partners in crime, but the good kind. We've bonded over shared experiences, over stories and laughter. They've shown me that life's got so much more to offer when you're not stuck in a toxic loop. We're planning this road trip, something I've never done before. We're talking about hitting the road. No set destination, just the open highway and a world of possibilities. It's like one of those movies, where the hero hits the road to find himself. Only this time it's not a movie, it's my life. And Jenna? She's become a chapter in my old life, a lesson learned. I'm not bitter, I'm just done. I've turned the page on that part of my life. There's no revenge plot, no grand confrontation left. Just a quiet acceptance and a determination to build something new. As I pack up my car, I feel lighter, like I'm shedding a skin that no longer fits. I've got my guitar in the back seat, a bag of clothes and a heart full of hope. Lisa's planning the playlist and Mark's in charge of snacks. It's a motley crew, but man, it feels right. We hit the road, and with each mile I can feel the weight of the past fading away. The open road is therapeutic, like a balm to my soul. We stop at diners, chat with strangers, and watch sunsets that paint the sky in colors I've never seen before. This journey, it's more than just a road trip. It's a journey of self-discovery. I'm learning to laugh again, to take risks, to live in the moment. Lisa and Mark, they're not just friends, they're my lifeline to a world I'd forgotten existed. Night falls and we're sitting around a campfire, sharing stories and dreams. I look up at the stars and it hits me I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm not defined by my past, by Jenna, or by the mess she left behind. I'm my own person with a future as wide and open. It's hard to recognize my life looking back on it. I'd always thought it would be a normal small town dream, wife, 2 kids, dog and a little house. And I was well on my way to securing that little slice of Americana for myself. But despite being the best contractor in the county, The life I'd built came tumbling down one day when I found out what my wife's extra shifts really were. I'd always been proud of my wife long before the pandemic brought everything to a screeching halt. I known the work that being in the healthcare field was like running a perpetual gauntlet, one covered in someone else's vomit. Melissa spent long hours taking care of elderly dementia patients in a nursing home as a CNA early in her career, coming home in tears at the state of the facility and the lack of help. Then when she became an RN, she was able to move on to greener pastures. First stop, our local emergency room. Despite her small frame and bubbly demeanor, my wife had always been one hell of a daredevil. She loved the heart-bursting adrenaline of roller coasters, and she drove far faster than even I dare to. That made her a great fit for the ER, where you had to know how to handle your adrenaline and still act. Finally, her career landed her on the nursing career version of free parking. She became a flight nurse. For the first few months, her social media was full of posts showing her next to the helicopter in her full gear, looking tiny next to the man who she said was a pilot. She informed me it got a lot of attention from our friends. Social media was never my thing, so I took her at her word. As for me, I'd never done anything much. Melissa was my greatest accomplishment in life. Just like her, I'd headed off to college just after graduation. Unlike her, I'd been more interested in making things than helping people. A career as an engineer was what I'd been pursuing when I met her. Within 2 months, we were engaged and planning our life together, and my studies simply gave way to her own. Her job saved lives. After all, my career path wasn't anything quite so noble, so I fell back on my high school job, working construction in a business owned by a friend's father. The money wasn't much, but it was enough to keep us alive while Melissa finished her education. Even when she was working while at college, it was a pittance. My paycheck and sweat ensured she ate, got to class, and had a roof over her head. She said one day, through tears, as I surprised her with the money, she'd been short to cover her books one semester. I told her, "You will make it through, I promise." Then I kissed her on the forehead. She didn't need to know. I skipped lunch every day for the last 2 months to scrounge the money up. By the time she made it to the big leagues of nursing, life wasn't quite so unsteady. We'd made it through the hard part. Now she was practically raking in the money. For the first time in our lives, it felt like we could relax and enjoy ourselves a little. I started taking more holidays off, hosting more barbecues for our friends, even went to an NFL game once or twice. And her girls' night out, girls' night in, spa days, she was gorgeous. With as much time and cash as she spent at the salon and the mall, you'd hope so. But why should I care? She was bringing home the dough, and I was reaping the rewards. There was a downside, though. I began to feel lonely. With all of her time at work, and all of the time she spent focusing on herself, she had hardly any time left for me. Of course, she deserved pampering. After all of those hours being selfless, helping her patients in every place she worked, but it didn't make the feeling any better. I loved my wife and wanted her desperately every minute of every day. And I couldn't seem to get her to sit still long enough to let me show her how much I adored her. Finally, I knew what needed to be done, knew exactly what would really catch her eye. Being young and paying for our own wedding, a honeymoon hadn't been a possibility. It had saddened Melissa to no end, and no groom likes to see his bride looking down on her wedding day. So, I made a promise to her that one day I'd take her wherever she wanted to go in the entire world. Whatever she wanted, I'd make it happen. And I had always intended to keep that promise. For our 5th anniversary, I kept that promise. I'm not too manly to say the week wasn't magical. Spending 7 days with the most beautiful woman in the world, seeing her body bronze in the sun, and become dewy against the sheets. It's something anyone would be over, and she was as happy about it as I was. The glow in her eyes told the whole story. It felt like we were brought out of stasis. We'd entered upon saying I do, and that we were newlyweds all over again. There was no getting enough of each other. We made love for hours every night, every day. Even today, I don't think the memory of that vacation will ever leave me. Now much more bitter than before. It's still something I'd enjoyed so long. I know it would never leave me. When we got home, I carried my wife, still as beautiful as the day I married her, over the threshold. It was the first time I'd felt good enough about myself as a husband to do so. How could things have gone so badly wrong? The first thing that dented this haven we created was while other couples were stuck at home together, whether fighting or, well, I was stuck at home by myself. Melissa seemed to be working constantly. When she came home, she'd have indentures from the PPA on her skin. I tried to kiss her, rub the marks to make the pain from them go away, but she'd usually push me aside. I understood. I really did. She was working an exhausting schedule and trying to fight a battle against an enemy that she couldn't even see. What kind of jackass husband would put sex above something like that? So I focused my love on being accepting of her and of doing my best to support her in any way I could. She'd come home to a hot meal and a strong drink. No matter what time it was when she returned whatever she wanted, I had it before she could get the sentence out. Her feet hurt. No worries, babe. I'll carry you to the tub so you can soak. And I didn't ask anything in return. Showing love to healthcare workers wasn't just a social movement to me. It was something I was throwing myself into with the woman I loved as the recipient. But even as things seemed to be slowing down, she started staying away more and more. I don't want you to catch COVID, she told me one day, after she spent a full week in a hotel room near her workplace. Your family's health history isn't great. Your grandma's got emphysema, and you're the only one that can go out and about without possibly spreading it. She promised me things will be back to normal and we will possibly go away again. I wouldn't realize until hours later that neither of us had said I love you, not once in the entire conversation. It made me feel like a failure of a husband. After all, she was my wife, my life, and I loved her dearly. But something inside me didn't sit right. That night I hardly slept, even as I tried to drown that feeling in my gut in cheap beer. Not long after that hit, I got another one. I lost my job. The owner felt horrible as he'd known me since I was a kid. We're letting everyone go for now, he said, everyone but me and the family. It's all I can afford. And I don't know how much longer that'll last. As soon as everything's back to normal, I will hire you again. And if you find some other job in between and you don't want to leave it, you will get no hard feelings from me. If you come back, I'll make it up to you. I'll give you a promotion and a raise. But for now, I gotta let you go. I took my marching papers along with a glowing reference and a promise not to fight unemployment and came home early to an empty house and an absent wife. This was the time when the loneliness was the worst. I called and called, trying to get a hold of her somehow, if for nothing but our budget. She had to know that I just lost the only job I'd ever had, and the income that had helped her rise to where she was today. The phone would ring and ring and ring, but I never got an answer. I must have texted her dozens of times, nothing. But I assumed she was busy with work, and there was nothing more noble than working extra shifts at a hospital during a pandemic. Finally, 2 days after getting the axe, she answered. The sympathy I expected, it was clear I wouldn't find it with her. Why? How could you let this happen? She said, sounding angrier than I'd ever heard her before. She berated me, told me that she had no intention of supporting a spouse who didn't work. It was an ugly side I've never seen of her before. This was North Carolina and we'd both gotten a heaping dose of old-fashioned values just from living in the place, but I'd always thought of her as my partner in life. And my partner had just left me feeling alone, uncared for and disgusted. After that, the next weeks were a blur. I'm not proud to admit that I spent most of the time drunk. Doing anything else felt like moving a mountain. I just wanted to wilt, to wallow in the sorrow that my happy life and marriage had become. Melissa and I didn't talk much. I only saw her once a week, sometimes less. We slept together once. She did seem nicer, more caring, even apologizing for her outburst. But that feeling in the pit of my stomach was back and it wasn't leaving. During one of our phone calls when she answered, I could have sworn I heard a man's voice. It was low, a bit gruff, and I couldn't make out what he'd been cut off from saying. The tone, though, unmistakable. Asking Melissa about it made her laugh. She said, "You just heard the TV. I'm catching up on some shows. I haven't had a chance to watch in a while." Then I asked, "Why did it stop?" "Because I paused it to talk to you." She stopped for a moment. "What are you trying to say?" Suddenly feeling foolish, I didn't tell the truth. I brushed the question off and tried to talk to her as though nothing was wrong. Something was wrong though. Very wrong. I'd hear her answer the phone out of breath. It would be because she just hurried back to the hotel to rest her feet. But never again did I hear that voice over the phone, at least. One day when I had run out of beer to drink and pity to consume me, I decided something had to change. I knew my wife was off work. Now COVID be damned. I was going to pick up flowers, put on something that wasn't 3 days worn. And I was going to go see my wife. She'll be so surprised. I thought I had no idea how right that would be and how wrong at the same time. I had always known where she was staying while she didn't like me to visit, and had told me of her own accord. I put my foot down. I was going to know where my wife was spending her nights. If only so I know where she was. If something happened, they were across town, close to the hospital she worked out of. It's why she said she had chosen them. At the front desk I stopped. A woman was working there, red-headed, a bit slim, but with green eyes that struck me for a moment, feeling a moment of disgust with myself. I smiled in a friendly way. It took some smooth talking, but I got a key card for her room. Her booking with my credit card helped with that. That was exactly what I wanted. I didn't want her to have the chance to turn me away. Here I was dressed in my Sunday best and carrying a bouquet of lilies, her favorite flower, and a bottle of rose wine, her favorite drink. I was ready for a special night. I walked into a nightmare. Upon opening the door, I didn't really comprehend what it was at first. The lights were on and I saw the bed unmade. Then I saw skin. Then I saw red. I was stunned, which is lucky, I suppose. Otherwise, I might be in prison now, but it was clear what was happening. My wife, my Melissa, being intimate with another man. I felt ill. I felt something beyond anger. By now she noticed me. She was shrieking, yelling about something, then sobbing. The man was putting clothes on. It was such a blur. Somehow I ended up in the foyer of the hotel, sobbing, heartbroken, and barely conscious with grief over my lost marriage. It was the receptionist that had given me the key that finally helped. A hand was rubbing my back. That contact had more intimacy than anything Melissa had given me in months. My thoughts began to cool. I began to calm down. You seem like a good man, she was saying. You don't deserve someone like her. Don't let her do this to you. It's going to be all right. I asked her what she meant and the truth came out. My wife hadn't been working so many extra shifts. In fact, she'd worked little more than I had. A steady 40-hour work week. All that time, she had been sleeping with other men. The receptionist hadn't kept careful track, but knew it was more than one. I didn't go home. I went to my friend's house, the one whose father had given me my job. He drank with me and let me crash on his couch until I felt like coming home. That took 2 days. There was one stop made between his house and mine. As it turned out, she was there trying to explain, wanting to save our marriage after putting nothing towards it, then shattering it with her infidelity. I didn't want that. How could I? I'd never see her as my Melissa again. She couldn't be my wife anymore. Not after what I'd seen, but I decided to get the truth out of her and I could use this to do it. Tell me, I said, my voice so grave I could hardly recognize it. Tell me how many, and don't lie and say that was the only one. Eyes watery. She looked down, ashamed, I supposed, at her behavior. Oddly, I found that I didn't care about it. I was completely detached. 3. She told me the whole story, skipping no details. At every point in her career, she found somebody to screw behind my back while I was slaving away in the summer sun. She was studying with a fellow nursing student while in school. She didn't pull extra shifts at the nursing home. A cook there had caught her eye. There was nobody after our trip. She said fervently, nobody, just you until the man she'd been caught with, the pilot she worked with. Of course, suddenly she was wiping her face. Please, please forgive me. I'm so sorry. She repeated in stuttering litany. Look, I got you something. It's tickets for that Hawaii vacation. And I interrupted her. I got you something too. A look of fear came over her face. Melissa didn't answer. The only reply I had was handing out a packet of divorce papers. The divorce wasn't terribly lengthy, for about a month or so. It seemed like Melissa was going to push to stay together. I'd heard that her pilot had gotten into trouble with his own wife for sleeping with mine. She decided to stay, but he was to have nothing with Melissa, with the other lovers long in the rearview mirror that left her alone as I'd been. I wasn't alone anymore. I was living my life and getting on with it. Work hadn't hired me back, but I'd been building my reputation as a contractor. The pay was small as of now, but quickly growing. My buddy didn't mind me staying in his garage apartment until I found something a bit better. Best of all, I'd gotten a pretty redhead's number from the hotel. Her name is Jean. We've had dinner 3 times now. I've never had to call her back more than twice. As for Melissa, there's something we both learned about our state law. When adultery is the cause of the divorce, it can be used to determine certain aspects of the split. Things like alimony. The judge was horrified by Melissa's behavior and took into account everything I'd done to help her and how my now ex had betrayed me. That account turned out to mean a rather hefty sum of alimony every month for a very, very long time. The first night after the divorce was complete, Jean and I made love. After all, I'm not a cheater and she's not looking for